Hello, I'm Dirk Norris, the Executive Director of the New Mexico Film Foundation. I'm here with directors Christopher Boone and Kevin Smokler virtually at George R. R. Martin's Jean Cocteau Cinema. I'll be discussing with Christopher and Kevin's film Vinyl Nation. Tickets to view the film are available at the Jean Cocteau Cinema, jeancocteaucinema.com. And Kevin and Christopher, it's very nice to meet you.
Thanks for having us, Dirk.
Thanks, Dirk. Great talking to you.
So I thought the film was terrific. I really enjoyed it. And first tell me, well, the first question that I have is how big are your record collections?
Kevin, you first.
I started a little bit earlier than Chris. I was early to this trend, which pretty much never happens to me, but or for me. But I got back into records around 2007, which coincidentally right around the time that records started their comeback, their ascent, which has not stopped since. Mm-hmm. That isn't why I got back into records. I knew someone who happened to be getting rid of an old turntable and amplifier, and he sold them to me for a song. And I said, well, I guess now I'm a record person again. But since then, I have also inherited my father's collection, my wife's late grandfather's records. So I've been the beneficiary of a lot of other skilled collectors before me. And the result is I probably have about 650 records now, and 650 full-size 33 LPs and maybe 145s.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't get back into records until about 2014, when my wife, Jennifer, made the mistake of buying a turntable for us. And I actually had worked at a record store in the late 90s. So just having the excuse to buy physical record media again for music was all I needed. And I was off to the races a bit there. And then my daughter actually got her first turntable about a year later. And so that's been really nice to be able to give her music as a gift. And in terms of our record collection, mine's not nearly as large as Kevin's nor any of the people in the film, I think, but we're creeping up on 100, which again, I don't think of as a lot after I've seen real collections, but I have been surprised. I look at our collection, it doesn't seem large. And then when I go through, I was like, oh yeah, no, we're picking up. It got a little larger today because today is the first record store day drop. And so I was able to land some stuff online that you normally can't do on record store days. But thankfully, I was able to pick up some choice cuts. So I'm looking forward to expanding the record collection when those arrive.
And I have a rule for myself that I can't buy anything new until I've listened to the last set of records I bought. So my birthday is August 7th, and my wife was nice enough to take me digging on my birthday. So we're still making our way through the haul for my birthday 3 weeks ago. So I think that means we're mostly going to be listening instead of acquiring on record store day this year.
That's probably a good policy to have. Do you remember your first record?
The first record I owned was a copy of my parents. My parents, for some reason that they've never explained to me, had 3 copies of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and I absconded with one of them when I was very young because I think I liked the cutouts that came in them. So that was technically my first record. But as part of this adventure, the guy who sold me his old record player was playing Minnie Repperton's Perfect Angel when we met up, and he showed me this record player, and I loved the album, and it sounded so great on the record player, so that spiritually it felt right for that to be my first record acquired as an adult.
Right.
I would say I have a memory of the first LP because I was born in 75. And so I was, when I got into collecting music, I was more in the cassette era and then the CD era. However, when I was younger, I remember my mom's old turntable was down in the basement. We did have 45s, and I'm the youngest of 3 boys. So I had no problem putting on Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall when I was 3 years old, and following that up immediately with Summer Loving from Grease. Like those two things, they just worked for me. And as I got a little bit older, I do believe I had an Air Supply 45. I do know I had Got to Be Starting Something from Michael Jackson. Did not own Thriller, but I did have the 45. And then as an adult, when my wife bought the turntable, she was kind enough to pick up a used copy of U2's The Joshua Tree, which is probably my favorite album. So that was how this record collection got started.
I was 12 when I got my first album that I bought with my own money, and it was Arlo Guthrie's Hobo Lullaby, and I was just very proud of that and played the crap out of that record, which
oh yeah, man,
seems like from the film and all your research and all the people you have talked to is a pretty common thing. And before we just start the discussion, just for the viewers, this reminiscing we've been doing is about the film Vinyl Nation, which is a documentary about kind of the resurgence of vinyl records in the culture and how it's grown and who's participating. And again, kudos to you guys for making this film. It's really terrific. One of the themes that seem to run through it, or a lot of people talk about, is that there is this certain tactile sense about records and record covers and the artwork, that it's very tactile. It's something you can hold on, you can read, you can look at. And I've heard people talk about books that way. Rather than reading something online, they want to turn the pages and hold the thing. And it seemed to be just about everybody that says that in the film. Where does that come from?
Oh man, Chris, do you have a better answer for this? I feel like I'm gonna mostly tell fairy tales until I come up with something.
Well,
good.
So I think where that comes from, at least in this current climate in this time, especially for younger generations, is I don't think it's a coincidence that the resurgence of vinyl records starts in 2007, and that's the same year that the iPhone launches. So we've already had iTunes out for many years before that, and everyone's got their iPods, and now the iPhone all of a sudden makes it so you can take it with you all the time, and it completely makes sense, and all that music can just be in that one device. And while that's taking off and it's been around for a while, people start to realize they're losing something. They're losing this connection with music that they used to have. And for a number of us, it was CDs, but then going back, it was obviously records. And that's at that moment in time, it was easy to buy used records, like Kevin was mentioning earlier when he got back into it. Like you could find anything and it was super cheap. And the beauty of records is if they're well taken care of, they sound amazing. That's what's always blows me away is there's a lot of talk about 180 gram vinyl, new pressings, virgin vinyl. And some of my best sounding records are incredibly thin and feel really flimsy, but they were just super well cared for. Mm-hmm. And there's not a scratch or a pop on them. And they sound amazing. And they're big. There's something you can hold on to and look at and put up on your wall. And a lot of young people were buying records and just putting them up on their walls as an emblem of that. I'm a fan and I own it. And I put it on my wall. I don't even have a turntable. I didn't think that was true until we started making this movie, but we found plenty of people who were like that. So I think there was this idea of like people needed something tangible because we were losing all of that on our digital devices. Since then, the two have kind of gone together, and we show that in the film. Like Spotify works perfectly with collecting vinyl records because you can discover music on your streaming service. And if I figure out, do I really like this album? And if you do, and you really want to support that artist, buying the record is the ultimate way to do it. And it gives you the opportunity then to sit down with the record, spend time with the liner notes, look over the artwork, put it on display, and just really enjoy the record.
Yeah, I think we both had this. There was this idea in the wind when we started the movie that we wanted to interrogate the idea that people liked records because records were old technology, that buying records wasn't much different than like buying a vintage car or a vintage microwave, or not a microwave, like a stove or some bit of mid-century technology because of the charm or hipness associated with that. And I think what we came up with is, as Chris was saying, records and the age we live in are actually really complementary to one another. My own journey with records wouldn't have happened without the internet. I viewed records initially, and I got back into them in that brief window of time when it was still, at the very end of when it was still cheap to acquire records before the comeback began and the market kind of caught up with them. To me, it was like going to music community college. Like, it was a really cheap way to learn about music. But I wouldn't have known that Louis Armstrong had 75 albums without the internet and without all music and without being able to list everything that I needed to learn about Louis Armstrong out. And without easy access to information, I wouldn't have had that sort of deep studied, almost academic relationship with records, which has really spurned my collecting and love of the medium since.
Which is people back in the day would get that information by hanging out at the record store.
Yeah, and people, and thankfully the comeback, the Renaissance has put a great record store in basically every community in America. And I think people still do that. I think people still say, I think people still hang out and say, well, the Clash had 6 studio albums. I have 0. Where do you start, and what is your trajectory through the catalog? I think people still do that. I think people also come into record stores with lists now that they've acquired through their own research and say, I know what I think I'm here for, but I'm also really happy to be surprised and led astray too.
I think that's one of the things that we're really missing right now this year during this pandemic is the ability to go to record stores and meet other people and share stories and talk about records and learn about music. I mean, for me, when we were going all over the country to film Vinyl Nation, whenever we went to a record store and if somebody was kind enough to offer us a record, or if we were at a record label, same thing, we never turned them down. But a lot of times they would ask, well, what do you like? And I very quickly realized during the filming of this that my answer was, I'm not going to tell you what I like. I'm too stuck in my own lane. I want to discover new music. I want you to tell me what you think I should be listening to right now. And when I say new music, I don't mean it had to come out right now. It's just new to me. Mm-hmm. And some of my favorite records in my collection right now are records that were given to me by people that we interviewed or recommended by those people. And I never would have picked it up myself. I wouldn't even thought of it. I wouldn't even known who the artist was. But they put it in my hands and I went home and I put it on my turntable and I was like, I'm so happy I didn't tell him what I like because I like this. And it's so outside of my comfort zone. And my record collection just got more eclectic as a result. And we really are missing that right now. And we hope our film gives people a little bit of that sense of connection. Because ultimately that's what our film is about. We discovered it's about human connection. And I'm glad that on Record Store Day drop today and continuing in September and October, people are able to get to some of those stores and see some people, but it's still not quite the same. So hoping everybody continues to stay safe and so we can get on the flip side of this pandemic so we actually can get back to those record stores.
Yeah. And one of those record stores in Santa Fe that Dick Rosemont runs, the guy in the Groove. Just a plug for him because he's really terrific and so knowledgeable. And something that else that comes through in the film is the diversity of people that are listening to vinyl. You really bring that out. All kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and cultures and all kinds of ages. It's not just the Santa Fe guys with long ponytails that are 65 years old.
Definitely. I mean, vinyl people are everybody, which is we were really happy to find out. We had a vague notion of that when we started, and when we started, we also were like, well, we've really put ourselves up against it here by calling the movie Vinyl Nation. Like, underline that word. Like, it's got to look a little bit like this thing called a nation. Which means we got to go to a bunch of different places. We can't just go to obvious places where music cultures exist. And we've got to talk to a representative, as best we can, cross-sampling of Americans and what it means to belong to this thing called Vinyl Nation. And we asked a lot of directed questions. We asked a lot of questions like, tell us women who own record stores, tell us someone over 70 or under 15 who loves records, those kind of things. but also we were just, I think we discovered something that was lying in plain sight, which is that record people are everybody. And it also, it helps that we are in this particular moment in time where, I mean, I think all of us on this call are old enough to remember that you kind of, when you were growing up, you kind of chose your record tribe and stuck with them. You know, I like this kind of music, not that kind of music. That person over there likes this kind of music. To someone in their 20s or teens now, that seems very strange because it's sort of all available all the time. You know, life is one big record store where you're just kind of pinballing around from different sections saying some of this and some of this and some of this. It's like everybody is eclectic by default, and we kind of hoped that was reflective in the people in our movie.
And what was great was we, as Kevin was saying, actively sought out a diverse group of people to interview for the film, because we believed that would tell this true story. But then when we went to Mills Record Company in Kansas City, which is in the opening scene for Record Store Day, and when we went to the Austin Record Convention, you can see it for yourselves. There are old people, young people, families with their young kids, again, all races, all creeds, just it's everybody. And they are all just enthusiastic and excited, and they're meeting each other and talking about records and learning about records. And it's just a big celebration and just a ton of fun. So that was really encouraging. Like, we believed that to be true, but to be able to capture it on film was fantastic.
I was blown away by those the record conventions and just how big they were and how many records people were bringing in to trade or sell or listen to. And the ages, a little kid that is talking with one of the dealers. And that was just, it was really incredible. And some great shots from, up above, being able to see the whole convention center or wherever it was held. And all those people. It was really wonderful.
Yeah, that was the Austin Record Convention. It's the biggest record show in the United States. I think it's the second biggest in the world, actually.
Right.
And they were nice enough to let us go up to the top floor of the Palmer Center where that was filmed, and so we could shoot it from overhead. But the day we filmed the Austin Record Convention, we were like, okay, let's try and get some sort of cross section of the kinds of people that are here. And it was just dizzying after a while. It was like, I mean, once every hour we were checking in. We're like, okay, have we talked to any kids? Okay, have we talked to any senior citizens? Have we talked to families? Have we talked to people not from America? We talked to two guys who came from Buenos Aires every year just to go to the Austin Record Convention. So, that was an amazing day.
Yeah, and that was like you basically finished talking to someone and say, okay, who's someone else that we haven't, a certain kind of person we haven't talked to? It was just basically like turn 90 degrees. Like, oh, this person right here, we'll just keep our setup right there. It was a really special day. And the Austin Record Convention has just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Before the pandemic, they hold it twice a year. And every time they hold it, they just keep breaking records, unintended, of how many people show up. And it really blew our minds. Like, we had seen photos, but until we got there, didn't really understand the true magnitude of it and the excitement behind it. So that was a really fun day.
Has this been running for 20 years or 30 years, or is it relatively new?
It's been running since 1981, I believe, is the first time that they launched it. I think there might have been a year or two where it was much smaller. It had been smaller. It had been in like hotels and things like that early on. But I believe it's been running pretty much consistently since 1981. And as you can see, if you see the film, it's a family run show. And Nathan Hanners, who is the current main organizer, his father, Doug, is the one who started it. And Nathan grew up at the show. And Megan Clark, who we also interview, is one of his best friends. And she grew up working at the show with him. And they just, over the years, just kept coming back. And now they essentially run it. And their kids now come to the show, as they talk about in the movie. And it's just a really big special event. And for them, as Nathan says, it's like a reunion every 6 months, because the dealers from all over the country and the world show up each time. And so it's just a very, very special event, but incredibly welcoming as well. And that's something that sounds like from our interviews has really changed over the decades. It used to be, this feels like it's just for certain people.
Really?
And it's not, and never really was, but there was that sense, there was that stereotype. But that's couldn't be further from the truth today.
Terrific. Another thing you guys touch on are the people who are actually making the records, that are pressing the records. And I was kind of surprised. It seems like they have an incredible amount of pride in the product they're putting out. And it also seems like they're basically mom and pop stores. They're not, big, huge corporations that are, sending out millions and millions of records. Am I correct in that?
Some of them feel like mom and pop operations because the person who founded them is very close to the manufacturing process. He's not in our movie, but Chad Kasem, who started Quality Record Pressing in Salina, Kansas, that was the first factory you see in our movie. There isn't anything that happens at that factory that Chad and his sort of pressing his floor manager Gary Salstrom, who's kind of the Albert Einstein of record pressing. There isn't anything that happens in that factory that they haven't laid hands on and made sure happens to a certain standard of quality. And so that can feel, even though that is a robust, substantial business with about 100 people working for it, it can feel like a mom and pop operation. Contrast to that is United Record Pressing, the oldest record factory in the United States, in Nashville, Tennessee.
That's currently continuously running.
Continuously running, right. Yeah. Which we have both of their previous building in East Nashville and their brand new building, which was the new building is entirely the product of the comeback of records. And the old building had 12 pressing plants in what looks like kind of a fair-sized auto dealership. And the new plant is the size of 2.5 football fields and is and has 42 pressing machines, or between 40 and 45 pressing machines. That is a major business. And they're doing pressings for, Taylor Swift records and stuff like that.
But then we also showed 2 other pressing plants in it, and they both have a kind of a different model. We have Gold Rush Vinyl in Austin, Texas, and that also is a smaller operation who just came into being a few years ago because of the resurgence of vinyl records. And when that happened, the existing pressing plants like United started to run into bottlenecks, and there were really long wait times if you wanted to get your album pressed and you weren't with a major label. So a lot of indie artists really struggling with 6 to 9 month wait times, and they want to go out on tour and be able to bring records to their merch table, and they just couldn't get it. So Gold Rush Vinyl started up because Karen Kelleher recognized an opportunity. She'd worked at Google and also managed bands, and just thought, I think there's a way to do it. And it was literally on a whim that she put together a business plan and got, as she says in the movie, $500,000 of loan financing from a bank. Right. And then on the flip side of that, you have somebody like Jack White, who has been a huge proponent of vinyl throughout his career, and had worked a lot with United on pressing his records, and then just decided, I want more control over this process, because that's just kind of the person he is. So we went to Third Man Pressing in Detroit to show that operation that Third Man Records, his record label, put together. And it's much larger than, say, Gold Rush Vinyl is today, but it's still on the smaller side of things. And it's really focused on quality, also supporting independent artists, supporting local Detroit artists, and also being as environmentally conscious as they possibly can be in the entire process. So not letting things go to waste, not letting wastewater go to waste, and just streamlining the whole process. And at the same time, when you see the movie, Third Man Pressing is gorgeous. And if you're ever in Detroit, you have to go to Cass Corridor and stop in at Third Man Records, and the pressing plant's in the back, and you can go on a tour if you plan ahead. Again, when we get past this pandemic.
Yes, everything's qualified by those words of when we get past.
Certainly, yeah.
Well, I want to ask you about actually making the film, and you tie all this information together very well, I think. But documentaries are kind of their own beast, and sometimes become very organic in nature, and you have to follow the story rather than following a script. Give us a kind of an idea of what that process was like for both of you.
When we were putting together whom we wanted to talk to and the papers and pitch deck for our investors, we actually structured it like an album. We said, here'll be the 6 tracks we want to cover on side 1, flip it over, here's side 2. And the shell of that is still within this movie. Chris, who had been through this process before, knew that once we dropped our footage, our logged footage on the doorstep of our post-production team, that they were going to have their own way with it, and the movie would emerge like a butterfly coming out of the chrysalis in post-production, which is in fact what happened. And we were pretty sure that, and by the way, everybody in the movie we talked to on the phone before we went and filmed them. We had a budget that was limited enough that we could not travel to film someone unless we had a pretty good idea they would be a good interview subject.
Sure.
And as such, we were pretty rigidly scheduled when we made the movie. We did a week on, a week off throughout the spring of 2019. And I think we only had one surprise. Our one surprise was our invitation to the Austin Record Convention came through at the very last minute, and we were where were we, in North Carolina the day before that?
Yeah, we were right before we went on that trip. Yeah, we realized we had to rearrange the trip and get from North Carolina over to Austin. So not too bad.
Yeah, so it wasn't terrible, but Chris and I we had a pretty firm idea of what we thought the movie was going to be about when we started pitching it and interviewing people and in pre-production. And we said, we think it's going to be one of these. You think the definition of record people is this big? It's actually this big. We thought it was going to be a movie about expanding the idea of what we have around people who like records. And our post-production team said, our post-production team said the real theme of a documentary always comes out later. Like it's never quite what you think it's going to be while we're shooting. And we're like, tish-tosh nonsense. We know exactly what we're making.
Yeah, right.
We know exactly what we're doing. We wouldn't put ourselves in a van and drive across the country if we didn't. And of course they were exactly right. Chris, you want to tell them what emerged and
So we worked with a team actually in Austin, Texas. So Jason Whaling was our post-production supervisor, but he's one of our editors, and his collaborator David Fabello is our other editor. And so Jason was the first one who went through all the footage with our assistant editor Jacoby Alvarez. And while he was watching all the footage, Kevin and I were going through the transcripts and doing a paper edit on it. And Jason was looking for these moments that would kind of shine through and could turn into scenes, maybe even mini stories. And then trying to see if there was a narrative thread there, not even thinking about what we had done before. And then we were over on our side, kind of looking at our track list and our outline and putting together a paper edit that way. And then the minds met. And so we then had to hash out, what is the story really? And the thing that came out very early on, especially as Jason was going through the footage, and then when David came in, he really honed in on this too, was what you guys have actually made is a movie about human connection. And Jason pointed out really early on, he said, I'm watching all these interviews, and we did 45 distinct interviews, not counting Austin Record Convention or Record Store Day. And he said, I think if you put any two of these people in a room together, they would immediately become fast friends, even though they come from totally different backgrounds. Obviously, they have the love of vinyl records in common, so it would start that way. He's like, but I really just think they would all get along. And so it started to make sense that while we were looking for a narrative, this is going to be a conversation amongst these 45 people, that they were going to take us through the story. And what was fascinating to me was, in the end, I can still see the skeleton of our initial outline in the film. And yet there's so much of it that we completely discovered purely based on what came out during those interviews. And what was fascinating too was to see 2 or 3 people that were very different from one another, very different, tell almost the exact same stories, and then be able to cross-cut among those people to have them share the same story, which I just absolutely loved. I really love the editing process. That's the last chance to write something. It's the final rewrite, and I love getting in there. And Jason and David just were so fun to work with, and they really got it and just helped us kind of hone in on those points. And I think they were surprised too when we got down to it. When we had our initial kind of rough cut, it's always too long. They're like, okay, we'll see what these guys want to do to, cut this down. And I'd already walked in the door, and I was like, okay, the last chunk of the movie, I've already got like 20 minutes out of it. And they're like, what? And we went through and took that stuff out just real quick one day. And all of a sudden we were already down to 2 hours. And they're like,
Wow.
Oh my God. I was like, yeah, it was still hard to fine tune that to 90 minutes, but they were shocked. Like, oh, you didn't mind killing your darlings. I'm like, not at all. Let's go.
Well,
Let's
yeah,
do
that's the thing. That's my baby. You're killing
Yeah.
my baby.
It's like, nope. And that was one of the things I learned personally. So like, I think we mentioned at the beginning, this was the first documentary for both Kevin and myself. Kevin comes from the world of writing books, nonfiction books, and I come from the world of narrative filmmaking, both as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker. And neither of us had done documentaries. And so, for me, it's a lot harder when you write a script and then you go into edit. Like I need another editor there because I need that person to help me understand, like, this is a better way to do it. Like, we don't need this line. This look tells us all. And usually when I'm there, I'm like, yep, you're absolutely right. And as a writer, you kind of beat yourself up. You're like, man, I didn't even need to write that line. But sometimes you did just to get there. None of these words were my words. They weren't Kevin's words. They were the words of the people that we were talking to. So I love all of them and I love all the words that they said. But if it didn't fit into the story, I was more than happy to say, like, it's got to go. Like, it didn't hurt as much. And its edits are always in service of the movie. You always have to do it to, like, let's make the best movie we possibly can to make sure we're telling the best story we possibly can while keeping the audience engaged. And in fact, we cut it down so much that when we were watching it, I immediately said, as we went through like the first 15 minutes of what was close to a final cut, whoa. I want things to go fast. This is going too fast. We've taken too much air out of it. And so David and Jason said, okay, it's like an accordion. We've compressed the accordion and we're going to give it a little bit more air. And we put in some nice moments to help it breathe a little bit. And all of a sudden, okay, now it's working. So again, that for me is just a ton of fun. It's hard to get to that point, but once you get that footage, I love doing that.
It was super fun. Like, it was really, it's like watching a kid it's like watching something grow up and come into itself. It's really neat.
Well, it sounds like your editors were very understanding and kind of hand holding a bit. Not all editors are like that. They just get out of the room.
But they were also willing to listen. Like, they would voice their opinion and they came to us with great story ideas and strong opinions and great takes on scenes. And then it was truly a collaborative process. You know, sometimes things were very obvious. That works. Other times it's like, I don't know so much. And we would have to go around and around the room. Kevin did an awesome job, I think. This would be in his first film of any kind, really helping us help represent the audience in the room. You know, really being like, the three of us had a little bit more, a lot more experience, honestly, doing this kind of work. And Kevin said, whoa. Like, from an audience perspective, I think we're going to lose them here. This is still not clear. So we don't need to, like, slow it down or spell it out, but we got to be a little bit more mindful of what we're doing here. And so just having all those different voices in there, it just makes the product better. And it's why I told Kevin, I said, Kevin, if you were going to do this, I need you to know something. I do not like the credit "a film by." I don't put it on any project I ever do. So if we're going to do this, we will not have a credit "a film by," because it's a film created by a whole group of people and everybody's contributing their skill sets and their creativity, and every idea needs to be considered as a good idea, as long as it's servicing the story. And so we just owe a lot to everyone that worked on our film. It looks the way it does because Sherry Kalk, our DP, is amazing. And it flows the way it does because of Jason and David. And it sounds the way it does musically because of our composer, Catherine Bostic, and our music supervisor, Morgan Rhodes, who's even in the film. And just without these people and all the other people that worked on it, all the sound recorders we had everywhere we went, the PAs that helped us, you know, more post-production team, like, Vinyl Nation doesn't exist without all their contributions.
Right.
We were very clear with everybody we hired and worked with. We're like, we want you here because of what you bring to the table and your point of view and your strengths as a creative person. We are not interested in yes men and women. We do not need to waste your time and ours having you being cautious or tentative around telling us what you think. We want your best self here. That's why we've hired you. And I think, we were really fortunate. We were really fortunate that everybody not only understood that, but really had an incredible best self to bring. We can't say enough good things about our crew.
That's great. And the question was, you talk to a lot of people all over the country. Did you both go to all the interviews, or did you split it up?
We both went to all the interviews. Yes. Yes, and I'm the back office guy, and Kevin's the front office guy. So I was essentially in charge of putting together the calendar. That being said, everywhere we went, like we would arrive the day before we'd start shooting, and throughout the shoot, we were scheduling like 2 weeks. The next trip, we were scheduling, making sure we were locking in all those interviews in the previous trip. So many times Kevin and I would land in a city, go to a coffee shop, and spend the entire afternoon just figuring out, okay, this person's available in Philadelphia in 2 weeks on this day. And then we got to drive up to New York City, and then we got to do all these interviews, and then we got to get down to Baltimore. And it was, I mean, just moving it all together. So even if that was maybe my responsibility on the back end, and Kevin was responsible to make sure to get the interviews dialed in, like we still had to work on both things. Kevin would show me the interview questions that he was proposing. And then during the shoot, Kevin would do the interviews, but then he would come to me and say, did I miss anything? Because in the moment, sometimes you don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Not that Kevin didn't know what he was talking about.
No, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. And then the weirdest quirk that happened that Chris sort of predicted that I didn't predict was that after we were done filming, before we got on a plane and went home for that week, and Chris went back to Albuquerque and I went back to California, we had to make sure we each had copies of the footage that was filmed, because God forbid we put the footage in one person's suitcase and they were lost on a flight or something like that.
Right.
And so in order to make sure that we each had duplicate hard drives of the footage that was filmed, we had to finish filming, and there had to be a window of time between when I yelled cut and we went to the airport, so we could each walk away with a different hard drive. Right. And so we would often find ourselves sitting in a Starbucks or a local coffee shop or a diner or something like that, or even like an airport lounge, just waiting for the hard drive to go like this. And I would be preparing the questions for the next week's interviews, and Chris would be scheduling things out, and we just sort of look at each other and you go, 47 minutes.
But I mean, honestly, that had a huge impact on our schedule. Like, we needed to know we could get to the airport on time and have all the footage. To all the DITs out there, I always had respect and love for you. I have so much more respect and love for you. We couldn't afford to bring you guys around the country and having to bear that burden. But it really did happen that way. And in fact, one of our interviews was with Stephen Thompson, who you can hear on NPR's All Songs Considered. And he lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, and we were in Baltimore. And while we were doing, and that was a Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore swing. And during that swing, Stephen got back to us and said, "Oh, I can talk with you." And Kevin's like, "Can we make it work?" And I was like, I think the day of our flights we can do it. And it was, I don't know, it was a little touch and go. So we drove down from Baltimore to Silver Spring, crammed in the interview, and I'm literally looking at my watch going, "Kevin, like, we gotta go. We gotta wrap this up." And of course we wrap it up, but Steven's so nice, and he has a wonderful record collection, and he even has a beautiful video game collection. And I was like, okay, but we really have to go. We have to go. And then we did have to go to a coffee shop, and download. And, luckily we never missed a flight because of downloading footage. We always had it in each location. But yeah, it's those things that you have to think about. It's like, and we were literally traveling, Kevin, myself, and our DP, Sherry, just the three of us. And then we were picking up our sound recordists and picking up our PAs depending on what city we were in. So it was fun.
From each city you were in, you were using different sound people.
Yeah, because we just could not afford to fly more than the three of us everywhere. The budget just didn't have it. So we had to hire local sound recordists and local PAs everywhere we went. And so, but that was fun too, because then those people, especially the PAs, could help point us in the right direction of, okay, like, where's a great place to get lunch that's not too far away from here? Like, we have some ideas, and Kevin always had ideas. But every once in a while we'd be in a bit of a bind, and the PA was always the go-to, like, okay, help us out here. And so it was fun to get to know those people too in all those different cities.
And how did you find these people? Were there like local film offices that you could contact?
Yeah, a combination of a lot of different resources. Production Hub, using that as a website. If either of us knew anyone in those cities, just reaching out to those contacts. I met a filmmaker at a film festival way back in 2009 who we met in DC. He lived in Lawrenceville, Kansas. I said, hey, do you know any PAs that could work with us and sound people that can work for us? We're coming to Kansas, going to Kansas City, but then actually shooting in Salina, Kansas. He gave us connections. So it was just a lot of reaching out and networking, but just cold calling too, and looking for things. One of the things we also tried to do in our hiring was we tried to, as Kevin likes to point out, like 2 white guys, let's see if we can make this a little bit more diverse if we're going to make a movie with a diverse audience, a cast. And so we set out early on to try to hire as much diversity as possible, women and people of color. And I will say I tried to hire women sound recordists. And I'm sure there are actually a number of them in LA and New York and those production hubs. And I'm sure even here in Albuquerque, we have them too. But I have to say, in smaller cities around the country, I couldn't find them. I found one who I couldn't even get a hold of. So that's the one area of our film where it was all guys. And it wasn't all white guys, but it was all guys. And that was a bit of a struggle. And I wish it were different. And I think if we had more time and more resources, we could have done something differently there. I will say all the guys that we hired as sound recordists, fantastic people, totally on board, super professional. You wouldn't even tell that we have 14 different sound recordists because the movie sounds consistently fantastic. And Eric Friend, our post-production sound supervisor, is also amazing too. So really kudos to all those people, because honestly, we met all of them the day we started working with them. Wow. And that's always a bit tricky. So we really appreciate all their help.
Quickest way to kill a film is bad sound.
Totally. And we said that, and I always said that to people right up front too, and they knew it. They're professionals too, but that was an area where we made sure that to hire professionals, and we're willing to pay them what they were worth, because we can't take chances, especially if you're making a movie about records. It's just gotta sound good.
We knew with our limited budget, we're like, and this was a conversation, I might have said it first, I don't know, maybe Chris said it first. We were both thinking it pretty much at the same time. We're like, with the money we have, it's got to look great and it's got to sound great. And so we have to hire people who are absolutely the best in those areas. You cannot have a movie about music that doesn't have the hand of real professionals on it. And Catherine Bostic, our composer, and our music supervisor, Morgan Rhodes, that's why the movie sounds as good as it does. Like we gave them a very, very basic direction because it was pretty much all we had at that point. Chris and I were like, we don't know how to take a movie that tells the 75-year history of records in America. We don't know what that movie's supposed to sound like. And so we kind of threw up our hands and said, it's supposed to sound like the past, present, and future all at the same time, because that's what records are. Right, and right. Morgan, being a complete pro and a genius, was like, okay, and went off and did it. Catherine, same thing. Catherine was like, sure, I know how to do that. And that's why the movie sounds as good as it does, and why we get so many compliments on how it sounds, and we always say, well, that's because of Catherine.
One of the discussions about making documentary films is the amount of participation the filmmaker has, and whether they're present or not in the film. And those are usually a pretty conscious decision, and it seems like you guys made that decision to not be in the film. You don't hear Kevin you asking the questions, and we don't see you, and you're not doing any kind of narrative, except in one scene where you walk around the camera and hug this woman who, is this the woman who couldn't decide what would happen to her albums after she died? Or was that somebody else?
No, that was Ashley Ann Krigbaum, who's a DJ and a radio producer who at the time was based in the Bay Area and is now based in Los Angeles. And we asked that question of everybody. We talked to, and it was Ashley Ann who sort of had an idea what she wanted done, but it was thinking about it was very emotional. And Ashley Ann and I were friends, and that's why still friends. That's why I walked around the camera and hugged her. And it was a genuine reaction on both of our parts, but my first reaction was, okay, we're just going to cut the interview before that, because like that's not part of the movie. And then afterwards we were packing up the gear, and Chris turns to me and goes, that is in the movie.
well, yeah. And it was funny because I knew the scene, I knew her moment was in the movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wasn't sure. And I said to Kevin, like, yeah, that's in it. Your hug may be in it too. I'm not sure yet, but that moment, that was the very last thing we shot in our first week of filming the whole documentary, and we were in the Bay Area, and there were a lot of good things that we captured, but that moment was special, and it hit everybody in the room very obviously, as you can see on camera. And yes, it was the moment where I was like, we have something. This documentary is going to work. But honestly, we went round and around about when to cut that scene. And I actually then became more reticent, I think, as we were going through it, I just don't know how people are going to react to it. If Kevin does come around the camera and gives her a hug, because they don't know that Kevin and Ashley Ann are friends. Right. And so we turned to our editors, we turned to Jason and David, and we said, what do you think? And they're like, that moment is just too good. It's real. It's really happening. And it's not, Kevin didn't do it for the camera. He just had an honest reaction. I need to get up and give my friend a hug. And I said, do you think the audience is going to, and they said, it actually doesn't matter. And that scene, from the day we first put it together, just except for like going back and forth on that scene, we knew it was going to be in the movie, and it was my favorite scene from the beginning, and it just became an issue of where does this go in the movie. So that scene moved around a lot, and we had a lot of good conversations about it. I'm happy with where it ended up, and again, it's still, the moment still rings so true. So we really appreciate Ashley Ann for sharing that story, because it was very special, very vulnerable, and very special.
It's very touching and a little bit startling for that to happen, just that one scene where, there's the filmmaker, but reaching out in that way, I thought was very nice. It was a terrific job on that.
Yeah, other than that, yes, we don't let you see us in the film. Although if you look really closely, Kevin is in the film somewhere else, but I won't say where.
No.
I've
yet to find myself. Like,
I think you know where you are. I think you do.
I have
but anyway.
an idea, but not. I haven't.
Yeah, Kevin doesn't even apparently know where he is, but I do. And the funny thing is, like, I managed to stay out of the frame, and the only time I would have shown up would have been in like the Record Store Day shoot or the Austin Record Convention. And I know how we cut something in the Record Store Day shoot that I just missed the cut. And if I had been in it, I would have told the editors to roll it back to get me out. Now, in that wide shot of the Austin Record Convention, I'm there, but you will never see me. And it's not because I'm a little dot. I am literally tucked behind like a little folding wall. So I know exactly where I am, but there's no way you can find me. So, and I remember peeking around the edge of it and see the camera and be like, oh, nope, back here. So I try to stay out of it. I don't think I show up in any reflections either. Just to your point, I just wanted to let the characters do the talking, but we did break that rule, and rules are meant to be broken when it serves the story. And it did in that case.
Absolutely.
Well, I thought it was a really terrific film, and I wish you guys the very best of luck. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
I mean, we are releasing the movie this way because not only because we're in the middle of a pandemic and there are far fewer theaters open than we would like, but also because like the ecosystem of music venues and movie theaters is hurting right now. And it's really important to us that our movie, which is about the connective experience, not only of music, but of art and human creativity in the first place, that ecosystem needs places to live and be celebrated. That thing needs places to live and be celebrated. And so that's why we're releasing the movie with over 100 partners in 34 states, including amazing venues in New Mexico, like the Jean Cocteau, because these places are hurting right now, and that's why we're splitting revenues 50-50 with all of them.
And more importantly, we want theaters like the Jean Cocteau Cinema and the record stores to be around when this is all over, because they make our cities great. And these are the places that we love to go to and hang out to. And they're just a huge part of our lives. And it's so painful right now to not be able to go to these places and experience these things with other people. So we know this might just be a small part of that, but I think that's the most important thing for us. Yes, we want people to see our movie, but even more importantly, we want you to support these businesses so they will be around for us when this is all done.
And us doing it us doing it this way is an expression of our optimism and belief in them. It's not, this is not a wake. This is us believing that they can and should exist and thrive.
That's really good to hear, the positivity, and I think people are really aching for community and being in touch with one another. So thank you both for doing that and making it available in this way. Kevin Smokler in San Francisco and Christopher Boone in Albuquerque, both directors of Vinyl Nation, which is available now, and you can get it on at the Jean Cocteau, jeancocteaucinema.com. Thank you so much. This has been a real treat for me talking with you both.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Dirk. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone in New Mexico, too, for supporting the Jean Cocteau and the other businesses in our state.
We miss you.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.
Thank you.